think a lot of people don't recognize when you're young, you like your toys. You like the fancy cars, or the idea of the fancy cars, or the boats, or having a private plane, or going on lots of expensive vacations. But as you get older, you start to realize that those things aren't that important. It's the people around you that are important. It's your family, and it's the people that need help.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hennche. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hennche, and I'm excited to introduce to you our special guest today, Jason Scott, a master flipper, accomplished real estate syndicator, and best-selling author. Jay started as a tech executive in Silicon Valley at companies like Microsoft and eBay. And in 2008, him and his wife, Carol, left corporate jobs to focus on real estate full-time. Over the past 15 years, they have bought, built, rehabbed, sold, and held over $150 million worth of real estate. Jay passionately shares his wisdom and has written multiple books on real estate and sold over 450,000 copies. He's also the co-host of the Drunk Real Estate podcast. Wonder where that title came from. And sought-after speaker, helping individuals worldwide start their real estate journey. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thanks, Hans. I really appreciate being here.
So for one, you have to explain the Drunk Real Estate podcast.
Yeah, so I've done a number of podcasts over the years, and most of them are very serious interview type podcasts. And last year, I wasn't doing a podcast, and I said to myself, if I could do anything, if I could just put together any podcast I wanted, didn't have any particular ambitions or goals with it, what would I do? And basically, I decided I would just want to get together with some close friends of mine, sit around and talk about investing in real estate and all the things that real estate investors really care about. And so I said, well, why not do that? So I started this podcast, and it is myself and three of my good investor friends and colleagues. And in the first episode, we sat down and three of the four of us had just happened to grab something to drink. I had a glass of wine, another one had a glass of wine, another one had a little glass of bourbon. And we realized we were all drinking basically. And so we said, hey, let's make that a theme of this show. And so Drunk Real Estate was born, and every week we get together and we talk real estate and investing and politics or anything that's related to our industry. We have a drink or two, and we just chat, and hopefully it's educational and entertaining for the listeners.
Reminds me a bit of Bubbles with Bethany.
It's very similar to Bubbles with Bethany.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. Where did your money mindset start? Is it something that was nurtured by your parents, or is it something that you kind of uncovered while you were a W-2 employee? Where did it shift to becoming an investor?
Yeah, so it started long before I started investing. I went to college, got an engineering degree, got a double W-2 job out of college, working for a tech company. And I was about 28 years old. So I was a few years out of college. I still had a bunch of college loans. I had a bunch of credit card debt. I grew up not with a ton of financial or investing knowledge. My family, we weren't poor, but basically lived paycheck to paycheck. And I think I didn't get a lot of great money management skills from my parents. So I'm 28 years old. I have about $30,000 in credit card and student loan debt and other types of debt. And one day I realized all my friends are starting to get ahead. They have a net worth above zero. They don't have a lot of debt. They don't have school loans anymore. And so I started asking myself, well, how are they doing it and I'm not? And I'm pretty obsessive when I'm interested in learning about something. And so I kind of dove into this idea of financial education. This was long before there were a million. This was back in the 90s, before there was YouTube, before there was the internet. And so I was literally buying books on the topic of how to manage my money, how to diversify, how to invest. And I decided when I was, I think, right around 29 years old, that I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to get out of $30,000 in debt in the next year. Before I'm 30 years old. And I was making at the time probably less than $40,000 a year, which was a lot back then, but still, basically a year's worth of income was my debt. But I got a second job. I started taking all of my extra money and putting it towards my debt. I started to invest in stocks and bonds and buying some precious metals and just diversifying, doing all those things that you're told to do or you should be told to do when you were younger. And before I knew it, my $30,000, it wasn't quite a year, it was closer to 2 years, but within about 2 years, my $30,000 in debt was gone. But I was hooked. At that point, I was tracking my net worth on a weekly basis. I was watching it go from negative 30,000 to negative 20,000 to negative 10,000 to zero. I get to zero and now I'm really excited. Now I'm going to start actually building wealth. And so for the next 10 years or so, I continued to just kind of save and diversify. And 2008 comes around and my wife and I decided to get married. We were both in the tech industry. When we left the tech industry, we knew that we didn't want to work 80-hour weeks anymore. We didn't want to travel 3 weeks a month. The stuff we were doing for our tech jobs, we wanted to control our own destiny. We wanted to run our own businesses. So we left the tech world and we kind of fell into real estate investing. But we quickly realized that this was going to give us the opportunity to do two things. One, it was going to give us the opportunity to really control our time. It allowed us to prioritize our family over our work, prioritize our kids who we were getting ready to have over making money. We basically had the control over our time for the first time in our lives. And then secondly, it was going to allow us to really supercharge our ability to build wealth and to grow our net worth. And so in 2008, that's when we kind of decided, okay, we're going to go from just being savers, people who diversify and kind of slowly build wealth, to we're going to be investors and business owners. And we're really going to try and supercharge this and grow massive wealth so that we could take care of our family and we could also give back to the community.
Yeah, nice. I especially like the part with giving back to the community. That's a big one for me. It's one thing to take care of yourself and the family, but once you get to that point where you can actually turn around, like who else needs a little bit of an uplift here? Like who can we share our time with, even before sharing money? Or because money is easily given away, but giving somebody's time, first you need to have the freedom to do that. And I think people really feel that.
And I think a lot of people don't recognize when you're young, you like your toys. You like the fancy cars, or the idea of the fancy cars, or the boats, or having a private plane, or going on lots of expensive vacations. But as you get older, you start to realize that those things aren't that important. It's the people around you that are important. It's your family, and it's the people that need help that are important. And luckily, we didn't throw away a lot of money on toys or fancy stuff when we were younger. But in retrospect, I'm glad we didn't. And so just advice to anybody out there when you're young. I mean, the idea of spending a lot of money on a car and flashy toys is kind of cool, but in 5 or 10 or 20 years, you're going to get to the point where you're going to wish you had that money back and you had it invested in compounding as opposed to throwing it away on toys.
Yeah, there's actually a kind of a mindset trick I do with myself. Every time I do a purchase, I'm thinking about it in compounded. I'm like, okay, if I compound that money for 10 years, and that's the real price I'm paying for the car, or that's the real price. And sometimes maybe I'm going a bit too far. I even do that when I go out for lunch or something. But, it's just to keep things in a certain perspective where this could take me.
Yeah, it's always good to ask yourself, what are those things that are really important to you to be spending money on? And what are those things that you're doing it because your neighbor's doing it or your friend's doing it or you think you're supposed to be doing it? And so for us, it's always been about experiences. My wife and I are foodies. We'll eat at an expensive restaurant. We'll put down $500 or $1,000 at a nice restaurant long before we would take that money and go buy a new couch or buy something else materialistic, because for us, it's that experience that we really appreciate.
So which was your favorite restaurant in the world you ate at?
Joel Robuchon in Las Vegas was absolutely fantastic. So that's probably one of my favorites. But I can enjoy it doesn't have to be a Michelin star restaurant for me to enjoy it. There are a lot of restaurants that I really like. And so just the variety of experience for me is it. I don't like to eat at the same restaurant twice.
Yeah. Really? Sometimes I feel like it's like, for example, the Blue Hill Farm in Westchester is one of my favorite restaurants in the world. And I've eaten that twice. And I'm like, because I've been there with my parents, and then I've been there with different people, and it's just like Now I haven't eaten there in years, so I wouldn't mind going back.
Yeah. So that, and again, that goes back to the experience. If it's just my wife and myself, we won't go to the same restaurant twice, but we will take our friends or we'll take our family because again, it's that experience that we're trying to relive with other people, and hopefully they get the same experience we do.
Yeah. So going back to the money mindset, one of the thoughts that came up when you were mentioning, back in the 90s, there were actually books. Do you feel like the quality of the material out there was better than today or worse? Given that today it's a lot easier to produce content and there's more people publishing books, there's more people publishing podcasts. The accessibility is easier today. And I think your commitment must have been a lot stronger than what it takes today to actually get to that information. But how do you feel about the quality of the information that was out there back then?
Yeah, so the quality is the same. You just have to wade through a lot more bad quality stuff to get to the good stuff. The average quality is worse, but there's still just as good quality stuff out there. The big difference in my mind is that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the onus was on the content creator to create great material. Today, the onus is on the content, the person that's gathering the content or looking for the content. The onus is on them to make sure they're finding the best content. And so basically we've put the responsibility from the side of the content creator to the side of the content taker. And so that for me is the biggest thing. And unfortunately, people that are looking for content today don't always know the difference between good and bad content. And so they can end up looking through all the content, finding a lot of bad stuff, and then learning a lot of bad lessons. A lot of times we tend to put more credence and weight on the first things we see or hear or read. And so if the first thing you read or you watch is bad information, you're going to kind of anchor to that information for the rest of your life. That's going to kind of take more precedence over stuff that you hear later, even if the stuff you hear later is better. And so what I definitely encourage people to do is make sure you're consuming good content from the very beginning. Don't consume necessarily lots of content. Find the quality. And to do that, find the content creators that are known for creating great content. I know there are a lot of people who are like, I'll watch anything. But the problem with watching anything is you're now going to have to go and figure out what's good and what's bad. And I would rather just start with the good content creators and know that everything they put out is going to be good.
But isn't there sometimes a difference between a good content creator and a knowledgeable creator? Like you yourself are very knowledgeable in real estate. And looking at your track record, I could assume that you have a lot of experience. And then I look at your content, and maybe from an execution standpoint, you could be a good creator or not. But then somebody who is just a good content creator maybe doesn't back it up with the right kind of knowledge or experience.
Yeah, sorry, and that's a really good point, and I should parse my words more carefully. When I say good content creator, the good is modifying content, not creator.
Yeah.
So it's important that the content is good, not necessarily that the presentation is good. The best content I find is people who really don't know how to create good content. If you watch any of my videos or anything that I've produced, I am not good at creating nice, pretty content.
Yeah.
I'm good at providing information. And so I know there are a lot of people that probably don't want to watch the stuff that I create because it's not fun. It's not polished like a lot of stuff out there. And so I think we need to all get better at being able to wade through the trash, whether it looks good or bad, and find the good stuff again, whether it looks good or bad.
I was just listening to a podcast from Tim Ferriss, and he spoke about how he feels like in order to reach a different magnitude with his content, he would need to entertain more, but he doesn't want to do it. He wants to stay kind of to the educational part of it. And he knows that will limit the reach because the reality is most people are out for entertainment. And I think that's actually in so many different ways true. When I sometimes look at downloads on something that seems extremely silly to me, it's like in the hundreds of millions. And then I look at something that's like life-changing for either the financials or health or something, and it barely gets any attention.
Well, I mean, you have to take it in from a holistic standpoint. Yes, there are things more important than others, but let's go back to you're a chef. And so I think when I go into a restaurant, maybe when you go into a restaurant, I can put the most weight on the food. I want the food to taste great, but it also needs to be presented nicely. And the service needs to be good, and the quality of the atmosphere needs to be good. And if none of those, or if any of those things are not good, it's going to degrade my experience, even if the food is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And so, while the food is the most important piece, everything around it obviously needs to meet some bar in order for that to be a good experience. It's the same way with content. The content itself, the information itself, is the most important piece, and it needs to be great. But if the presentation or the medium where it's presented or the person presenting it doesn't meet some minimum bar, that's going to detract from the value of the content, no matter how good the information might be.
Yeah. That kind of ties up with first impression. You know, if somebody shows up and looks extremely lousy, they might be super genius inside, but it's sometimes it's like it's hard to get over that and like actually discern and look at them like, okay, maybe they actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and that's a hard one for me because I spent much of my career in Silicon Valley in California, in the tech industry, where the smartest people wore t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops. It was the people that were walking around in suits and ties that were the salesmen that you didn't trust. Yeah. And so, yes, absolutely, you need to dress to portray what it is you're looking to portray, but don't always necessarily assume that there's only one way to portray that. And again, if I'm raising capital and I'm talking to a group of tech people, I'm going to dress very differently and act very differently than if I'm going to talk to a group of money managers or fund managers or hedge fund managers, because to them, that perspective on success is different, and the perspective on what somebody who is successful and trustworthy looks like is different. And so, unfortunately, we need to kind of tailor our expression, and whether it's raising capital or providing content, we need to tailor that to whomever the consumer of us is.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. But I also think it makes sense. You know, you want to reach somebody, and the easiest way to reach them is to look more familiar to them. It's like instead absolutely. Of offending them based on choosing a certain look, for example, there's like every older generation, if they look at new trends and they're like almost offended by the new clothing trend. And then if you choose to reach those people, you just stick with something that they're familiar with and they're fine.
Yeah. In psychology, it's referred to as mirroring. And we tend to trust those people that we see ourselves in. And it's a very common negotiating, I don't want to call it a trick, but a tactic that when you're negotiating with somebody, do your best to mirror what they're doing, have the similar mannerisms, talk in the similar cadence. If they talk slowly, you talk slowly. If they use certain words over and over, start using those words over and over. If they're sitting very relaxed, you sit relaxed. If they're sitting very formally and legs crossed and arms crossed, then you be more formal. And when somebody looks at you and they see themselves in you, they're naturally going to trust you more because they're going to assume, oh, he's a lot like I am, and I obviously trust myself. And so this idea of mirroring is very important. And so, yes, you need to know who the consumer of your information is, or the consumer of you, whoever that is, and do your best to again, try and mirror them and be like them as much as you can, because that's going to build trust quickly.
Does that also work for the party that is, for example, purchasing something like a car? Like the car sales guy will adapt to the buyer, but can the buyer reverse use that to adapt to the salesman?
Absolutely. So remember, a lot of negotiating is about building rapport and building trust, and this thing called reciprocity. We do things for others. We give to others because we feel like we owe them, because we feel like we like them and we want to be nice to them. And so anytime you can improve a relationship with somebody, anytime you can take a business relationship and turn it into a personal relationship, or even help the other side perceive it turning into a personal relationship, they're going to want to be nicer to you. They're going to want to give in. If you're negotiating with somebody that you've met for the first time, you walk into a car dealership, and that person that comes over to sell you a car is somebody you've never seen before, in a town where you're never going to go again, you're going to treat that person a lot differently than if you walk into a car dealership and it's your mom who's trying to sell you a car.
Yeah.
You're going to have a much different negotiating standpoint and attitude, and you're going to tend to give in a lot more if that's your mom than if it's some stranger you're never going to see again. And so the goal is, when you're in a negotiating situation, get to that personal relationship, build that rapport as quickly as possible. Because as soon as they start to see you as something other than just a potential sale, as soon as they start to see you as a human being, a person, somebody they actually could know and like, they're going to drop their guard, and it's going to be a lot easier to get concessions out of them from a negotiating standpoint.
Interesting. So, I mean, psychology applies to everything. So you can apply that to car sales and multifamily syndications.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's funny because I don't think a lot about psychology. I don't try and use tips and tricks. But one thing that I do is, everybody I talk to, I try and relate to them. I try and put myself in the mindset of, who is this person? What do they like? How do they feel? What do they care about? And then I try and become similar to that myself, because I know that's going to allow me to kind of mesh with them and build that relationship as quickly as possible. And so I'm not going to say I do that with everybody. I'm not going to be a bad person just because I think the person I'm talking to is a bad person. But I'm saying, from a mindset standpoint, what motivates the person on the other side of the conversation? Are they interested in sports? Talk about sports. Are they interested in, you and I are sitting here talking, I'm using food analogies because I know that's something that you can relate to. I'm not trying to trick you into liking me. It's just, I know that's something that we have in common. I figured that out at the beginning. And so why not focus on that, so that we can build this relationship more quickly?
So somebody coming into the real estate space, for example, another chef, many of the private chefs earning six figures or multiple six figures. If they were to come into the space, how do you think they can build genuine relationships with the right people? And what kind of relationships do you think have brought you the best outcome? Ideally, I guess, mutually beneficial.
So for me, it's not thinking about the outcome first. It's focusing on the relationship and letting the outcome define itself. So if I go into a discussion so I meet somebody at a party, and I start talking to them. I know a lot of people have this elevator pitch, where they have this 30-second rehearsed speech in their head. When somebody asks, what do you do? I raise capital for multifamily syndications, and I help people grow their wealth, blah, 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 blah. Basically sending the message that, why don't you come invest with me? I don't like to do that because, number one, I don't want to lead with a specific intention. So one, if they're not interested in investing, if they're not interested in real estate, I've now potentially blown that relationship.
Yeah.
But who knows? That could be somebody that could end up being a good friend. Well, why would I risk a potential friendship just because somebody doesn't want to invest with me? Or maybe they could be a partner. Or maybe they are a lender and they'd want to lend to me. Or maybe they're a buyer, they're looking to buy a home, or they're looking to rent and are looking for an apartment complex. There's so many more ways that we could end up having a relationship than them investing with me. And just because that's the primary need I might have at that moment, it's ridiculous for me to kind of pigeonhole that entire discussion around that one thing that I need. Instead, build the relationship. And who knows, a week later, a month later, 5 years later, I could end up having a great professional relationship with that person in a completely different capacity that I never even would have considered if I would have just tried to get them to invest with me that day. And when they said no, I went and talked to somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I've seen on conferences a lot, the people that are trying to chase the immediate investment, and they try to speak to 50 people. And at the end of the day, they haven't spoken genuinely to anyone.
Yep. Yeah, my goal is always to walk out of a new relationship just with hey, let's chat again in the future. If there's anything I can help you with personally or professionally, let me know. vice versa. And even if it's just personal, you ever need a recommendation for a high school for your kid? My kids are in high school. I can tell you about high schools. You're down in Fort Myers. I'm 2 hours north of you. If you have any questions about the west coast of Florida, let me know. This doesn't have to be a transactional relationship. It's just a relationship.
Yeah. And I think this is also where it becomes genuine, like some of the most lasting investment relationships came with people, that had very little agenda when they first spoke to me, and we were just genuinely meeting each other as human beings. And we realized that the way we see values, the way we approach certain things are similar, which then I think allows for business relationships.
Yeah, when I first started investing back in 2008, it was probably a year or two later. I was at a real estate meetup, and there was a guy there that we started chatting. And I'm very skeptical of people. I'm always concerned that people have some ulterior motive. So if somebody comes up to me and immediately tries to start selling me something or pitching me something or whatever, I get a little defensive. But this was just somebody who just wanted to have a discussion, and he just wanted to chat about personal stuff and business stuff and whatever. And we ended up becoming friends. And it turned out he wanted to learn how to flip houses, but he didn't lead that discussion with, "Hey, you flip houses. I'm interested in flipping houses. Like, can you teach me stuff or whatever?" No, we just started talking. We became friends, and it wasn't for a couple weeks until he said to me, "Hey, I'm thinking about flipping houses. I didn't really want to bring it up because I didn't want you to feel like I was just like talking to you to get knowledge out of you." And I thought, that's great. We're friends now. I'm happy to help. And we've gone on and we've done over $100 million in business together as partners over the last 10 years because he just led with trying to build a relationship and not asking me for anything and me not asking him for anything. Had he started that conversation with, "Hey, I know you flip houses. I'm looking at flipping houses," I probably would have just walked away. But instead, he genuinely wanted to build a relationship, and now we've been partners for a decade.
Nice. So what are some of the traits that you look for in a partner?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make in their careers is picking a bad partner. I like to half joke that a partnership is like a marriage, but if a marriage goes wrong, you only lose half of your stuff. If a partnership goes wrong, you can lose everything. So in some ways, a partnership is a bigger decision than a marriage. So some of the things I look for, number one, and I think this is the biggest mistake people make in partnerships, is they look for other people just like themselves. And this goes back to what we were talking about before. We like people who are like ourselves. We trust people who remind us of ourselves. But in a partnership, we don't want somebody exactly like ourselves because we have ourselves in a partnership. The whole purpose of a partnership is to find somebody who can complete you, who can bring all of the things you can't. When I look for a partner, I want somebody that is really good at all the things I'm bad at. And I want to be really good at all the things they're bad at, because put us together and now we're good at everything. And we can compensate for all of our weaknesses. So number one, when you start looking for a partner, don't look for somebody who's exactly like you, who has the same skills you have, who has the same background that you have. Look for somebody who complements you by having a different set of skills and a different set of strengths and a different background. That's number one. Number two, partnerships are hard. There are going to be times in a partnership where you're basically working for the other person. There's going to be times in a partnership where the other person's basically working for you. So it's really important that you're comfortable in both of those roles. If you're considering somebody as a partner and you couldn't both be their boss and their employee, it's probably not going to work out, because at some point in that relationship, you're going to need to be one or the other or both. So that's really important as well. And then the other thing I would say is go slowly, because a lot of people want to jump into partnerships, especially people that are new to the industry. You're getting into real estate and you're thinking, I'm getting ready to do my first deal. I'd love a partner to do that with me. You find somebody and you say, let's start a business together and buy 5 houses and do all this stuff together. And then you realize 6 months later that you made a bad choice, well, now you've done a whole bunch of stuff together, and it could take you years to unravel all of that and to move on. So instead, do one small project together, do one small partnership together. Don't start a company, do a JV. They have their company, you have your company, and your companies partner together. And then if that goes well, maybe start a company together and do one project. And if that goes well, then go to 2 or 5 or 10 projects. Take it slowly. Again, it's like dating or like marriage. You wouldn't meet somebody and on a first date propose. You need to get to know them and learn their idiosyncrasies and their quirks, and you need to be comfortable with all the bad things about them as well as the good things, and that takes time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also, you give them time to expose themselves if something is off, like sometimes it only shows when something actually goes wrong, and I think,
Yep.
And Warren Buffett speaks about that a lot. You cannot do good business with a crook, and you want to know whether you're with a crook or not before you get into a business relationship.
Yep. And here's the other thing. Even if everything seems perfectly aligned, even if they are a really good person that would make a perfect partner, the other big mistake I see people make is they don't ensure that their goals are aligned. Let's say you and I were talking about going into a partnership, and let's say we didn't talk about our goals, but your goal was to make $10 million a year, and my goal was to make $1 million a year. That shouldn't stop us from being partners, should it? Well, think about it. Let's say we partnered, and 2 months into that partnership, we make our first $1 million or $2 million. So now we've each made $1 million. You're thinking, great, that's a good start. Let's keep going because I want to get to $10 million a year. What am I thinking? I'm thinking I wanted $1 million a year. I've already made my $1 million. I'm going on vacation for a month.
Yeah.
And so now I've hit my goal, but you haven't hit your goal. And even though we both had perfectly reasonable goals, they didn't align. And that would make you pretty frustrated when I'm now ready to kind of take a break for the next 2 months because I've accomplished everything I've wanted to accomplish, but you want to do a whole lot more.
Yeah. I think this is a really tricky part of relationships. It's when that's out of whack and it hasn't been communicated properly before. But again, that's why you said it's so important to go slow and kind of explore all of that before one gets into partnership. And then for somebody who is maybe a potential LP and is looking at a GP, which is also a kind of a partnership, but you're basically giving the control for your money to somebody. And how does somebody, for example, like a chef again, who doesn't have the same exposure like you and me, we're seeing deals every single day. They're coming through. We have all kinds of different syndicators that keep sending us deals, and we kind of, out of that volume, we can see what's good practice, what's bad practice. I really want to stick with the people that are communicating extremely effective and consistently. But somebody who's new to the entire LP landscape, how do they make sense of that?
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of people, I invest in other people's deals as an LP. I own about 6,000 units that other people operate and manage, and I'm just a passive investor on those deals. And people assume that when I look at their deals to potentially invest, that I want all the financials and I want all the underwriting information and I want all the data because I'm going to dig into it the same way as if I were buying that property. But the truth of the matter is, there's no way I could ever get as familiar with the deal as the GP, as the operator. If that operator wanted to keep information from me, they could do that because they're so much closer to the deal. They can talk to the seller. They can talk to the broker. They know the property management company that's managing it. They know the area. So as much as I might want to dig into the data, it's not going to help me very much at all if the GP is trying to keep information from me. So I'm no different than you if I'm looking at a new deal. Even though I have experience, at the end of the day, you and I both have to trust that operator. And you and I both need to pick the best operator regardless of how much experience we have. And so when I look at a deal, I'm not looking at the deal. I'm looking at the operator. And I'm going to trust that if an operator is honest and trustworthy and really, really good at finding and operating properties, that they're making a good decision on this deal. A great operator is not going to take on a bad deal. So I don't care about the deal nearly as much as I care about the operator, because once I trust the operator, I know that the deal is probably good. I know that they've done their due diligence and they're not going to do a bad deal. And I'm not going to find anything they didn't find. So I spend the vast majority of my time underwriting the operator, not the deal. And how do you do that? So that's the big question. So first thing, I want to talk to other people who have invested with that operator long term. I want to find somebody that's been an investor for 5 years or 10 years. If they've been in business for 10 years and they haven't had the same investors for 10 years, at least a few of the same investors for 10 years, why not? Why did those first investors, why did they not come back? Or why did they come back for a couple years and then stop coming back? I want to see that. I want to talk when you tell me that you have a deal. Great. Let me talk to your very first investor on your very first deal. And if they say to me, well, that was 10 years ago. Well, why would they have gone away? If that deal went well and they found that you were trustworthy and honest and a good operator, why did they stop investing with you? And if they say, well, they stopped investing because they found other stuff to do, great. Can I still talk to them? Just because they don't invest with you, I can still talk to them, right? And if they don't want me to talk to those first investors, I know that something's changed over 10 years. And so that's number one. I want to talk with the early investors. Number two, I'm going to say to the operator, tell me the worst thing that's ever happened in one of your deals. Like, what's the absolute worst thing? If they say nothing bad's ever happened, well, then one of two things is true. Either they're lying to me, or nothing bad has ever happened and they've never had to go through a difficult situation. Either way, I probably don't want to invest with them. So when I say, tell me about the worst thing that's ever happened on a deal, I want to hear something really bad, because if you're in this business long enough, bad things are going to happen. And I'm not looking to hear about the bad thing. I'm looking to hear about how they overcame it. So I'm always going to ask, what's the worst thing that happened? Once they tell me, I'm going to say, okay, how did you deal with that? And then once they tell me that, I'm going to say, who were the investors that were most impacted by that? And can I talk to them? Because those are the investors that were at risk of having the worst experience. And I want to see how they came out of it feeling about the operator. I want them to say, yeah, it was really bad. I thought I was going to lose all my money, but the operator did everything right. And he communicated well. And in the end, everything worked out and I'm very happy. Or in the end, everything didn't work out, but I know the operator did everything he possibly could and I would trust him and invest with him again. That's what I want to hear. So number two is figure out the worst thing that's happened and the investors that were impacted the most, and try and talk to those investors. Because again, operators like to talk about all their happy stories, all the deals that went perfectly where they achieved their projections and did even better than their projections. But I don't care about those stories. I want to hear about the bad things and how they were addressed and overcome.
Yeah. You want to hear how they forgot to underwrite the rooftop properly and had to fix it after 18 months.
Absolutely. And let me tell you something. If they tell me, yeah, my second deal 10 years ago, I did a really bad job of doing inspections because I didn't know the right questions to ask. Great. Well, has that happened in the last 8 years? No. Great. We can move on. You learned a lesson. Unfortunately, like you had some investors that were not happy about it back then, but you've learned that lesson. You've moved on and you haven't made that same mistake. Great. Let's keep talking.
And that's also something that last decade, money was so cheap, and then we really had a compression in cap rates, and then anybody can make money in that environment, or a lot of people who cannot make money in the current environment made money back then. And then they're like, oh, here, look, we exited 3 deals and they all performed over our projections. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't make you a great operator.
Exactly. And I talk about that all the time. When I have LPs that come to me and say, tell me about the deals you've exited have performed. And what I say is, I don't want to talk about the ones that I've exited, because all the ones I've exited, we've done better than expected. But a monkey could have bought those same deals and done better than expected. Don't be impressed because I tell you that all the deals I did from 2016 to 2021 did great. Yeah. Because anybody you talk to, those deals should have done great. Ask me about the bad stuff, because I have bad stuff and I want to talk about it. And that builds trust. I'm being forthcoming with, I have bad stuff. Everybody has bad stuff. But instead of trying to hide it from you, that's what I want to talk about because that's what you need to hear. And when I say that to an LP, that like it flips a switch and they're like, yeah, all those GPs I've talked to that just wanted to tell me all the good stuff and didn't talk about the bad stuff. This guy actually is encouraging me to ask about the bad stuff. And so that builds trust.
You know, I've asked that same question a couple of guests, and I think you're the only one who is really going in that corner. And it's like, literally, it's like, ask me about the bad stuff that happened. Like most GPs don't want to go there.
Well, here's the other thing. I don't want my LPs ever to come in with this expectation that everything is going to go great. Even if it's gone great in the past, like I said, bad things happen. And the longer you're in this business, the more bad things are going to happen. Yeah. And unfortunately, I have some LPs right now. We have a deal that is going fine. But we've had to slow down distributions. We actually have a deal. We had to stop distributions because we got into an interest rate situation. We had to buy a new rate cap, which is this insurance policy that we have to buy. And so we stopped distributions for a year. And a lot of our investors, they understood. They're in other deals that the same thing has happened and everything was okay. But then we have a lot of investors who are like, I can't believe you stopped distributions. This has never happened before. And I'm like, you're right. This has never happened before because the market's been crazy. And these investors have never heard a horror story about something bad that's happened. And so they assume that nothing bad can happen. They know they have to sign the PPM and the subscription agreement. It says, here are all the risks. But they're like, yeah, that doesn't ever
30
really happen.
pages
That's
on
just
how
formality.
you lose your money.
Right. But the reality is, bad things happen, and I want my investors to know that because it makes my life easier when if something bad does happen, I don't have to stress over the fact that they were caught by surprise that something bad could happen.
Yeah. And I think especially now, so we're in 2024, environment has shifted, fundamentals have shifted. Now it's really on to the outstanding operators more than anything to make the deals happen. And like, we've just deployed some more capital in December, and we put it with a group where we felt like they vertically integrated. You know, they know the market extremely well. They know what they're doing. We've seen them executing the renovations on schedule with their own team. They're buying their own appliances for overseas. So we know that they're in charge of the supply chain as well as the renovation. So we're more likely to see a successful outcome there. That's my thesis. Than we will with somebody who just has to go get vendor quotes everywhere, and it's just a completely different game.
Yeah, vertical integration is a double-edged sword. There are obviously benefits to vertical integration. Like you said, a lot of times you get those economies of scale and you can cut costs. But at the same time, there's a lot of overhead. And you're now running multiple businesses. Yeah. And the hardest job in a business is being the CEO. And if you're the CEO in 3 businesses, you're probably not running any of them as well as if you were the CEO of one business. So then you have to ask your question of, if you're vertically integrated, how are each of those businesses being run? And if each of them are being operated as separate businesses, I'm a lot more comfortable than if they are integrated to the sense that it's the same people working in each business. So I don't want to hear that my operator is also the person he's the CEO of the syndication. Yeah. He's the CEO of the construction firm. He's the CEO of the property management company. He's the CEO of the materials provider. I don't want to hear that, because then he's spread too thin or she's spread too thin. What I would much rather hear is, yes, we started up a property management company. Here's the team that I put in place to run it. We started a construction company. Yeah. Here's the team that we have in place to run it. That's the type of vertical integration that I'm comfortable with.
That's the type of vertical integration that we invested with.
Yeah, that's great. That's the right kind.
Yeah. And well, one of my favorite questions that I like to ask towards the end is always, what does it mean to you to live wealthy life?
Yeah, it's such an important question. For me, I mean, literally, my family is up here, and everything else is down here. And knowing that I can wake up every day and be proud that I've done the right thing for my family and the people that need me. And when I say family, I'm not just talking about my wife and kids, but everybody close to me. I have a very small but very intimate social circle, and I just want to know every day I wake up that I'm doing the right thing by them and I'm putting them first. And then everything else to me is secondary. And if I can put that small inner circle first and do a good job of that, that to me is living a wealthy life. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with my professional life or my business. It really is just treating those that are important to me and close to me well. Secondarily, I do think the money is important because we talked earlier about the fact that I like to give back, and it's selfish. I like to give because it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And so if that makes me a bad person, I don't care. And I found that just being successful in this industry has freed up a bunch of my time. I have time that I can volunteer my time. I have money that I can donate my money. And for me, that's why I keep doing this, because while it's most important that my family is safe and secure and all of that, I know that there's a whole lot more I can do to help other people as well.
Yeah, nice. Sometimes I joke that if people were truly selfish, they would become more selfless. Because if you actually go there, then most of the juice in life comes from the joy of giving.
100%.
And like, if they're just stingily selfish, where they're like just thinking about themselves, they're not actually selfish enough yet.
That's a great way to put it. And I 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, where can people connect with you, find you? You have all those books behind you. You know, one of your last ones, The Real Estate by the Numbers. Where else can they find you? You have the Trunk Real Estate podcast.
Yeah, I hope everybody will check out the podcast. We really enjoy doing it. But yeah, it's easy. If you go to jscott.com, so just like my name, JSCOTT.com, that'll link you out to anything you might want to find about me. And my email's on there. So if anybody just wants to reach out, has any questions or anything I can ever help with, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Jay. This has been super insightful from my end.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.